Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I wanted to show an example of using a signal bus inside of Godot 4. So a signal bus is a global singleton object which contains signals, and signals are like events if you've ever used C#, where you can emit them in order to tell other objects which subscribe to that signal that the event has triggered. So the signal has triggered, and then anything that has connected to that signal will get a message with parameters that let it know that something happened. So in this case, I have a character who wants to know when a new level is loaded so that he can set a reference to the new tile map of that game level. So in a previous video, I created a height adjuster component, which means that when the player walks onto a tile, which is considered to be elevated, like these bridge tiles over here, that it will disable the ground collision underneath it, namely these water tiles, which you definitely can't walk across normally, and then allow the character to just walk across the bridge because it's no longer conflicting with any collision layers. So as you can see, the character can just walk across the bridge pretty easily, and the tiles under it, the water collision, still exists. It's just that the character has been temporarily removed from that layer. So in order to do that, you need to have a reference to the tile map, so you can check the tiles to see if they contain the elevated Boolean status. And now, of course, a normal way of doing it would just be to export your tile map variable and then assign it in the inspector. But that only works if your tile map and your player exist in the same scene on load. But what if your player is independent of your level scenes? You would load multiple levels, and you don't delete and recreate the player each time. Well, then you would need a signal of some kind to respond to when the new level has been created. So that signal is what allows the player to know about the tile map, allowing the height adjuster component to take advantage of the tile map to elevate the player. So this is the code for the signal bus. It is a node which contains a single signal, and that signal is level loaded. So in this sense, I'm passing the newly loaded level, and this level here is a custom declared class name. So this is a custom script that just inherits from node 2D and does some extra stuff for the child objects under it. But the key difference for the signal bus script is that we're not adding it to the scene hierarchy directly. We're actually adding it in auto load for the project settings. So if we go into Godot now, up to project settings, auto load, you'll see here that we're loading the script SignalBus here as a global variable, and it's loaded in with the node name SignalBus. So anytime you want to reference this singleton global variable, you write SignalBus and then period whatever method you want to call on the SignalBus. You don't have to get a direct reference to it because it's now a global variable. Okay, so now let's take a look at the two scripts which actually reference the signal bus currently and use it to actually achieve our goal of assigning the tile map to the player whenever a new level loads. So first off, I have my main gameplay script. The intent of this node is that when the game goes from the main menu screen to a new game and we're on any map, that this is the parent node of everything else that comes under it. So if you have any levels, those would be loaded as a child node under the main gameplay. You could call it a manager. I'm just calling it gameplay for right now. So in the gameplay script, you'll see that I've also declared signal level loaded here. So this is the gameplay's level loaded signal, which is different from the signal bus's level loaded, even though they have the same parameter and the same name. They're being emitted from different objects. So you would have to connect to one object to receive the signal from that specific object. So down here, when I'm actually emitting the signals, I call it twice, once on the gameplay object and once on the signal bus. So the signal bus, being a global object, would be appropriate if you want to connect and receive any notice of a level being loaded across the game. But then you might also decide to connect to a more localized object, like the gameplay object, to only receive the level loaded when specifically it's called from within gameplay.gd. Now this might not be the best example because there's only really one gameplay object in the game. But if you had, let's say, 10 different players and a player had their own signal, but you only wanted to know what player 1 was doing and you didn't care about player 2 through 9 or 2 through 10, then you would connect to player 1 the player 1 signal and then ignore the rest, and then you only receive the signal callback when player 1 has emitted the signal. So there may actually be a time when I'd only want to connect to the gameplay's emit signal here rather than the signal bus. So the signal bus is really good when you want to basically receive all of the messages of a certain type, and you can emit the signal from multiple objects and connect to it from a bunch of other objects, and they don't need to know about each other. They just all need to have a reference to the signal bus. Okay, so as for actually receiving the signal, let's go to my height adjuster script, and you'll see that on ready, I connect to the SignalBus's level loaded script, and I don't need to have an export variable for the SignalBus. I don't need to have the SignalBus in the same scene. It doesn't even exist before the game loads because it loads on auto load. But because we know it's going to be a global object, we just do SignalBus.connect level loaded on level loaded. So there'll be one SignalBus. It's a Singleton global, and we know exactly where to find it because it's set up in the auto load global variables. So all you need to do is do SignalBus.connect and then the signal you want to connect to, and you don't need to find the object manually. It's just right there in the global variables. So once again, what does all that mean? That means that I load my player at a different time when I load the level, and once the level is loaded, I can connect to the signal bus, and then when the signal bus emits the signal, level loaded, then I can find the tile map and use it for my height adjuster script. So the real advantage here is that you don't have to load the player and the object you're connecting to at the same time by having them in the same scene hierarchy. You can load them independently, find the signal bus object when you need to connect to it, and then you just receive the signal message whenever it's emitted from any object which calls on the signal bus. So if you're interested in this height adjuster example, I'll have links to the video and my scripts in the description below. But aside from that, thanks for watching to the end. I've been Chris, and I will see you in my future game development videos.